Do you mind if I join you? I'm rather getting tired of eating alone.
Of course. I was just reading, but I don't see why some company shouldn't be just as agreeable. Indeed, more so.
Thank you. And what were you reading? If you don't mind my asking.
Oh, it's some manner of treatise to do with the dynamics of an asteroid. Well, to be honest, I find it inspiring.
You're Kemp, aren't you?
Yes. My reputation precedes me.
It does. I'm Griffin. New boy. Started this Michaelmas.
I have noticed you, Mr. Griffin. You're not an easy fellow to overlook.
You're not the first to have said so. So, are your interests solely astronomical?
No, that's it's just an ancillary pursuit. I'd like to think of myself as a kind of experimental investigator. At least if I pass my exams. And you? What are your areas of speciality? What do you want to achieve once we leave these hallowed halls behind?
I'm interested, I suppose, in light.
Light?
In what it can conceal, as much as what it might illuminate. But most of all, to answer your question, when I go into the wider world, I want to do something which will last forever. I want to do something that'll never be forgotten.
Oh, but don't we all, Mr. Griffin? Don't we all?
So that was how you knew him?
University college. More than a decade ago now. Seems like a lifetime away.
But you realized the Invisible Man was him, your Mr. Griffin, all along?
I had my suspicions, yes. And as you can imagine, I was desperate to hear what you had never even thought to ask him. Namely, the full story of how he first came to be invisible. But before that could be achieved, he had to rest and regather his strength. I tended to his wounds and bound them as best I could. Afterwards, he slept, as soundly as a baby, although I fancy with rather less innocence. And then I had a few small arrangements of my own to make.
You wanted to give me some instruction, sir?
I did, Agatha, yes. Now, I hope you'd agree that I've always treated you fairly. That I've been a just and a reasonable employer?
That's true, sir. No complaints so far.
Well, I'm going to have to ask you to trust me. And not to ask too many questions, for there will be a number of strange events in this house.
Sir?
I'm asking you only to exert a little discretion. To look the other way and not to make a fuss. There'll be a bonus in it for you, of course.
I see, sir.
Now, do you envisage there being any difficulty with this arrangement?
I do not, sir.
Very good. Now, as of this morning, my study is out of bounds for anyone but me. Is that understood?
It is, sir, yes.
If you hear any voices or sounds coming from that room which do not appear to be my own, you will dismiss the thought as being the product solely of your imagination. Is that clear?
Quite clear, sir. Thank you.
Oh, and one more thing.
Yes, Doctor?
Would you be so kind as to wait 3 hours and then to deliver this letter? In person and into the hand of the recipient. It's for the garrison in Port Burdock.
Gladly, sir. I'm happy to be of service. But who is this Colonel Adey?
Now, Agatha, did we not just now agree that you would ask no more questions? That you would, for a short time, curb your curiosity?
Yes, sir. Sorry, sir.
Suffice to say, the Colonel is a man who owes me a favour. A favour, in fact, or two.
I see, sir. So, will that be all?
For now, Agatha, yes. That will be all.
Who was this Colonel Adey, then?
Oh, he was a local military fellow. I thought that if anyone could capture and keep Griffin, it would be he. I knew from experience that he'd do my bidding. I knew, too, that I would need some time before he came in order to hear the Invisible Man's account. As I spoke to Agatha, He slept on in my study upstairs. An hour or so later, I heard footsteps overhead. Griffin was stirring. But where in all of this excitement, Mr. Marvel, were you? For you seem rather to pass out of the narrative after the events at the Jolly Cricketers.
Oh, I'd made arrangements, sir. I'd made arrangements for my own safety.
Wake up, wake up. Rise and shine. It's your lucky day. We're going to release you.
Release me, Constable. No! Why?
Why shouldn't we? You like that, Sal?
Perhaps I've grown accustomed to it, yes. But there's no rush, is there? I was only arrested last night.
For common vagrancy. We've nothing to keep you on now.
But I need to be in here. I need to be safe.
That's so. Well, I'm very sorry, but we can't keep an innocent man behind bars just because he happens to like it there.
Right. Well, what if I were to tell you that I wasn't just a common vagrant? What if I was to tell you that I'm a criminal? Yes, that I've stolen. I've helped myself many, many times in my career. Helped myself to things that weren't mine.
Go on.
And what if I was to tell you that until recently, I was the only accomplice of the Invisible Man?
Marvel, isn't it? Thomas Marvel?
That's right, Constable.
Well then, Mr. Marvel, you'd better tell me more, hadn't you?
Ascending the staircase to see how my visitor had passed the night, I returned to my study, now something between a sick room and a cell. Upon entering, I was greeted by the most remarkable sight, for the Invisible Man was up, wearing my dressing gown, sitting by the fire, and smoking. A cigar floated in the air before him. It was so strange to see his mouth and throat and pharynx become visible, picked out by that whirling smoke.
Ah, Kemp, there you are. As you can see, I helped myself to your dressing gown as well as to your cigars. I knew you wouldn't mind, for I crave the gift, you see. The blessed gift of tobacco.
I couldn't be certain, but somehow I knew that that headless, handless creature was smiling at me, and not kindly.
You are eager now to know, I think?
Yes, I am.
Well, I consider it a fair enough exchange. Knowledge in return for the sanctuary you've given me.
Well, that's splendid.
Then sit beside me, light a cigar of your own, and you may listen as I tell you how I have wrought this thing.
Now, I'm not a scientific man, sir. I do hope that there's not going to be anything too arcane about all this.
On the contrary. Although he always kept from me the last specifics of the process, what struck me most in the end about his achievement was its remarkable simplicity. It was almost childish. So much so that anyone with the correct background and in possession of a sufficiently lively mind might have stumbled upon it eventually.
Even you, sir?
Yes, Mr. Marvel. Even me.
After my graduation camp, at around the time that you and I lost touch, I went first to the college at Chiselstowe.
Now, why on earth would you want to go and do a thing like that?
Because I became more fascinated than ever by the question of light.
I recall you mentioning something of the sort.
Optical density. That was the start of it. The whole subject is a network of riddles. A network with solutions glimmering elusively throughout. And I went on it. I took up teaching work to allow me to continue with my experiments. And I embarked on 6 months of such exploration, until one day I chanced upon a principle of pigments and refraction. A formula, a geometric expression involving 4 dimensions. Fools, common men, even common mathematicians would not know anything of what the discovery could mean to such as me. In those books which the tramp still clings to, there are miracles. Miracles, I tell you.
That I do not doubt, but to return to the question of your researchers.
My discovery was, you understand, not a method in itself. Rather, it was an idea that might lead to a method by which it would be possible, without changing any other property of matter, to lower the refractive index of a substance, solid or liquid, to that equivalent of air.
I find that very interesting, but I fear that I still don't quite see how to apply it to invisibility.
Listen, Kemp, listen closely. Consider this. Visibility depends on the action of visible bodies upon light. Either a body absorbs light, or it reflects it, or it refracts it, or it does all of these things. If it neither reflects nor refracts, nor absorbs light, then it cannot of itself be visible. Are we on this agreed?
Yes, go on.
You see, for instance, an opaque red box, because the colour absorbs some of the light and reflects the rest, if it did not absorb any particular part of the light and reflected all of it, then it would be, would it not, a shining white box. A diamond box, say, would neither absorb much of the light nor reflect much from the general surface. But just here and there, where the surfaces were favourable, the light would be reflected and refracted.
Of course.
You'd get a brilliant appearance of flashing reflections and translucencies, a skeleton of light. A glass box would not be so brilliant, nor so clearly visible as a diamond, because there would be less refraction and reflection. From certain points of view, you would see quite clearly through it. Some kinds of glass will be more visible than others. A box of very thin common glass would be hard to see in a bad light because it would absorb hardly anything and refract and reflect very little. And if you put a sheet of common white glass in water, still more, if you put it in some denser liquid, it would vanish almost altogether, because light passing from water to glass is only slightly refracted or reflected, or indeed affected in any way. It is almost as invisible as a jet of cold gas or hydrogen is in air, and for precisely the same reason.
Well, yes, that all seems pretty plain sailing to me.
Then here is another fact which you will know to be true. If a sheet of glass is smashed and beaten into powder, it becomes much more visible while it is in the air. It becomes an opaque powder, and if the white powdered glass is put into water, it vanishes forthwith. The powdered glass and the water have much the same refractive index, and so you make the glass invisible by putting it into liquid.
Griffin, these observations are really very commonplace.
Bear with me. I'm explaining from first principles. Now, if you accept that a transparent thing may become invisible if it is put in any medium of the same refractive index, you will see also that our powder of glass might be made to vanish in air if only its refractive index could be made the same as that of air. For then, there would be no refraction or reflection, would there? None at all.
That's very well so far as it goes. But a man isn't made of powdered glass now, is he?
Quite so. In truth, Kemp, he's even more transparent.
Now then, miss, I'm not sure what business you can have here.
I've a letter, Sergeant. A letter for your Colonel Adie?
The Colonel gets a lot of letters, miss. Let me take yours and I'll see that it gets added to the heap.
I was told to hand it to him in person.
I'm sure you was, miss, but you see, that would be very much against all of our important regulations.
I was sent by the scientist at Burdock, by Dr. Kemp, my employer. This letter is from him.
Did you say Dr. Kemp, miss?
I did.
Then you better come with me. This way now.
Think, Doctor. Think of all the things that are transparent, yet do not seem to be so. Paper, for instance, is made up of transparent fibres, but it is white, and it is opaque. The interstices between particles may be filled with oil so that there is no longer refraction or reflection. And not only paper, but cotton fiber, linen fiber, wool fiber, woody fiber, and bone kemp, flesh kemp, hair kemp, nails and nerves kemp. In fact, the whole fabric of a man, except for the red of his blood and for the black pigment of hair. They are all made up of transparent and colorless tissue.
You're right, of course.
Of course I am. I knew from the first. I knew that I was onto something wonderful. I got nearer and nearer to making my formula into a reality. I told no living soul because I meant to flash my work upon the world with crushing effect and become famous at a blow. I took up the question of pigments to fill certain gaps. And suddenly, not by design, but by accident, I made a physiological discovery.
And what was that? How did it happen?
It was late at night. In the daytime, one was always bothered by silly students, and I often worked until dawn. It came suddenly, splendidly, and completely in my mind. I was alone. The laboratory was still, with the tall lights burning brightly. It struck me recently that in all my great moments, I have been alone. And then it came to me that one could make an animal, a tissue, transparent, that one could make it invisible, that I could be invisible. It was overwhelming. I left the filtering that I was doing, and I went and I stared out of the great window at the stars.
A remarkable moment, to be sure.
Of course, to do such a thing would be to transcend magic. And so I beheld, unclouded by doubt, a magnificent vision of all that invisibility might mean to a man. The mystery, the power, the freedom. Drawbacks I saw none. And I, a shabby, poverty-struck, hemmed-in demonstrator, teaching fools in a provincial college, might suddenly become this. And so I worked for 3 years, and every mountain of difficulty I toiled over showed another from its summit. The infinite details, the exasperation, the students, the cramped means. 3 years I had of it. And then, after all that secrecy and exasperation, I found that to complete it would be impossible.
Now, why on earth was that?
Of all the absurd things, money. Namely, my acute and pernicious lack of it. That was all. Did you ever hear of such a thing? And so I turned, with great reluctance, to the last man in the world whom I would ever have wished to have asked for aid.
Agatha, isn't it?
That's right, Colonel.
Yes, I thought I recognized you. Kemp speaks of you a fair deal, you know. Talks about you all the time.
Does he, sir? Really?
Oh, most assuredly. He sings your praises when he's in his cups. But Perkins said something about a letter for me from your master.
I have it, Colonel.
I'd better pass it over then. Kemp's not the kind of man who'd insist on a thing like this unless it was of the utmost urgency.
Here, sir.
Thank you. Good God. How did he seem to you this morning, Agatha, when he gave you this letter? Afraid? Alarmed? Worried about security?
No, Colonel. He was none of those things. I'd say rather that he was in a state of suppressed excitement, as if he was on the brink of something unexpected and wonderful.
That's exactly what I was afraid of. Come with me, miss. This way. If I'm right, we don't have long.
I suppose you went to your father then, when you ran short of money.
I did. You may recall that ours was not the closest kinship.
I remember. You spoke of him once or twice, with nothing in your voice save contempt.
Since I was a child, he had all but disowned me. Because, you understand, because of my particular appearance.
Pity. It really is.
I thought so once too. Now I wonder if the old man didn't, without intention, teach me a lesson of real significance.
But you went to him. You asked him for money.
I did. And he was just as I had expected him to be, a cold, uncaring man, frailer than I remembered, but no less small-minded in his attitudes.
He wouldn't give you the money.
He laughed at the very thought of it. And so I simply reached out and took it for myself.
You robbed him.
Don't tell me that you would have done any less, Kemp. Not when you were so close. So close to the greatest scientific breakthrough of the age. Of any age.
I do not mean to judge you, only to hear the full truth.
That is as well, for my thievery was only the start of it.
What happened next?
The old man, my father, that money I had took was not his. And so, weary of the shame of his life, he shot himself.
Ah, Perkins, there you are.
Colonel, sir. Miss Agatha.
Sergeant.
Round up some of the men quick as you can. Say 5 of the most discreet of them.
Discreet, sir.
We're going to Dr. Kemp's house, but I don't want it to look like we're leading a lynch mob.
Why ever would you want to return in force, Colonel? There is only Dr. Kemp inside. Unless...
Yes, Agatha?
It's him, isn't it?
What?
Oh, but it must be. In our house.
Miss...
Sergeant, I do believe that at this very moment my master is taking tea with the Invisible Man.
I remember my father's funeral. The cheap hearse, the scant ceremony, the windy, frost-bitten hillside, and the college friend of his who read the service over him, a shabby, bent old man with a snivelling cold. The money I'd stolen, I'd spent taking rooms in Great Portland Street and filling it with certain necessary scientific appliances.
This question of invisibility had by then, I think, for you become an obsession.
Oh, it had long since passed into that realm. But there were moments, all the same, when I shook off all thoughts of it, like a man emerging from some thicket. Walking home on the day we buried my father, I passed a girl who'd once been my student. She recognized me, of course, who would not? And I found, without having to prosecute the slightest action, that we were, without minutes, taking tea together.
I was so sorry to hear about your father, Mr. Griffin.
Thank you. But the tragedy was ordinary enough in its way.
I was sorry to hear that you've given up teaching, too. I know some of the others found you rather forbidding, but I always thought there was such authority to you. It practically compelled one to listen.
Thank you. But I don't think I was ever meant to teach. It is not, you understand, my true vocation.
All the same, you are a loss to the profession. So, what are you doing now?
I am pursuing my own research.
Anything in particular? Or can't you say? I know how very secretive you chaps can be. But it was always light with you, wasn't it? The singular qualities of light.
You're right. I cannot say. At least, I ought not.
Oh, but surely you'd make an exception? For me? For an old friend?
Well, if I'm right, I could be on the cusp of discovering a process which will alter the very fabric of what it means to be human.
Goodness. How very bold a claim.
It is, if anything, Marie, an understatement of the truth.
Well, you may colour me impressed.
Marie,
Mr. Griffin?
might I see you again, do you think? Take tea with you again?
How very generous a suggestion. But, charming though our encounter has undoubtedly been, I fear Peter, my fiancé, would not approve. And speaking of him, I must be on my way. So nice, Mr. Griffin. So very nice to have seen you again.
Her rejection was neither unexpected nor unprecedented. Nonetheless, the business had added to my mood of melancholy. As I walked home, that temper first soured and then was alchemized into something useful.
Into, I think, renewed determination.
Quite so. We think alike, Kemp. I've always said so.
Perhaps. Perhaps we do.
But as I came back from that little tea shop, the truth of it occurred to me. The essential thing had to be to place the transparent object whose refractive index was to be lowered between two radiating centers of ethereal vibration. And so, with dark joy in my heart, I set to work once more. My first experiment was with a bit of white wool fabric. I placed it between the dynamos, and it was the strangest thing in the world to see that scrap of cloth flicker and fade like a wreath of smoke and vanish. I could scarcely believe I'd done it. I put my hand into the emptiness, and there was the thing itself as solid as ever. Fired up at this success, I was eager to test it on living tissue. And then, as of a gift from the gods, I heard a sound from nearby, and I knew what had to be done. A lean, white, very dirty cat was sitting on the cistern cover outside my window. I went to her and I called softly, "Here, girl, come on." I gave her milk, and afterwards she went smelling round the room, evidently with the idea of making herself at home. I let her do so, and I allowed her to settle upon the pillow of my bed. I gave her butter to get her to wash, and after she was clean, I processed her. It caused her, I think, some considerable pain.
So what happened? After that, did the experiment work?
In part. It took 3 or 4 hours, and it was a curious thing indeed to watch that beast fade and vanish. The bones and the sinews and the fat were the last to go, and the tips of the coloured fur. Only her claws and the iridescent pigment at the back of her eyes remained. Some atavistic part of her realized what had been done, and she meowed pitifully for what seemed to me like hours. Somehow, exhausted, I slept until being able to bear the thing no longer. I opened the window, and the cat fled gratefully from my domain.
Good grief. Do you mean to say there's an invisible cat at large?
It's certainly possible, though I'd imagine it's been killed by now. It survived for at least 3 days afterwards.
How do you know?
Because I saw a crowd around a grating in Titchfield Street. They were trying to find where the meowing was coming from. They were trying, and they were failing to understand the source of such confusion and pain.
Perkins, are the men all armed?
Of course, sir. They're waiting at the gates.
Not that conventional weaponry will be enough by itself. We're up against an opponent of a sort the world's never seen before.
I can still hardly believe it, that Dr. Kemp would consort with such a creature.
I shouldn't say consort, my dear. Your master's a brave man. Even now, he'll be playing for time, waiting for our arrival. We mustn't let him down. Sergeant, we depart at once. So,
Colonel, I shall come with you.
Miss, that's out of the question.
But I fear I must insist. After all, I am the only one who knows that house intimately. I know all the places to hide. Even an invisible man can't elude me there for long.
She does make a fair argument, sir.
I suppose she does.
Colonel, Sergeant, I believe you need me.
And after the cat, then a human subject?
Of course. I was by now in something close to a trance of ecstasy. I saw such possibilities, such wondrous possibilities.
You must have felt as did Columbus on spying the outline of a new coast, or as Newton beneath the apple tree.
More even than that. Something closer to apotheosis. Without any further hesitation, I began the process. I administered those initial drugs, those which are responsible for the decolorization of blood, and I felt surge through me the first waves of pain. Hours passed in that sweet agony, until I heard upon my door a subtle knocking. I took it at first to be my neighbours, or else my landlord in complaint about the screaming of the cat, or my own expressions of distress. Although, in that supposition, I was soon proved to be quite incorrect. Who is it? Who's there?
It's Marie, Mr. Griffin, from the tea house.
Marie, what do you want?
I only wanted to ask you to dinner, Mr. Griffin. My fiancé and I are planning a small supper party, and we should dearly love you to attend. I fear when we last met, I was perhaps a little too short with you.
Wait there. I'll come to the door. Marie, dear Marie, I'm afraid your invitation may have come rather too late.
My God, no, your face.
A curious thing, is it not? You should account yourself fortunate indeed to be so privileged as to witness my transformation.
No, no. What have you done? What have you done?
But you are not, I fancy, by that time yet wholly invisible.
I was not. The process in man appears to operate a little differently than it did upon the cat. My face had turned horribly white, like stone. It gleamed and it shimmered in the most devilish fashion. I cannot blame the girl for her reaction. Of course, she left me straight away, fleeing down the staircase, weeping and babbling in her womanish way. I returned to my room, I locked the door, and then I watched the final stage of the process.
Was it very painful?
Excruciating. Yes, beyond all measure. Yet glorious, too. I shall never forget the strange horror of seeing my hands become as clouded glass, and of watching them grow clearer and thinner, until at last I could see the sickly disorder of my room through them. My bones and arteries faded and vanished. The little white nerves went last. And so, with that strange diminuendo, it was done.
The first invisible man.
The only invisible man.
So what did you do after that?
I heard voices outside. That foolish girl must have raised a mob. I heard them coming closer, speaking my name, half mocking and half afraid. And so I turned the gas up high. I set a bundle of papers to burn, and I left that house, slipping away from a side entrance and eluding those who would seek to topple me. I was halfway down the street when I heard the explosion. I did not even look around, but rather walked on into London, into the heart of it, my head teeming with plans of all the things that I now had impunity to do. My mood was one of exultation. I felt as a seeing man might do with padded feet and noiseless clothes in a city of the blind. I experienced a wild impulse to jest, to startle people on the back, to fling people's hats astray, and to revel in my extraordinary advantage. But I soon realized the pitfalls of my situation. I was jostled and pushed, and several times came close to discovery. It was cold then, and I was without garments. It began to rain, and I left wet footprints upon the ground which might have attracted the worst kind of attention. All at once, I felt heartsick and afraid. Dogs and other animals seemed unusually aware of me, so heightened are their auditory and olfactory senses. And so, I found my way to Tottenham Court Road, and there, in that place of ceaseless novelty and modernity, I crept into a shrine to our new gods of money and convenience.
And where was that? I know Tottenham Court Road passingly well.
It was an emporium of some sort, named, I think, Omniums.
Of course. There's not a thing worth buying which Omniums can't sell you.
For a time, it was wonderful. I stayed hidden until it closed, and then I ran amok. I ate heartily, I helped myself to clothes, only the finest for me, lamb's wool pants and lamb's wool vest, socks, trousers, a lounge jacket, fine overcoat, a slouch hat with the brim turned down.
You must have made for an uncanny sight. A set of animate clothes floating through the darkness.
I dare say you're right, but there was nobody there to see me. I lay down to sleep in their department of beds and bedsteads, but I fear that I slumbered too long. When I woke, the shop was already preparing to open its doors to the public. My thievery in the night had been discovered, and I had no choice but to wriggle free of my garments and make my escape. Outside on the street, it had begun to snow.
You must have been very frightened, Griffin. You must have been desperate.
I was. And those things, I fear, will have to explain why I did what I did after that. After the store, I wandered for a time, but the snow was falling hard, and I knew that it would cover me and make my outline plain. So I went into a shabby little costume shop in Drury Lane, a dirty, fly-blown place. The owner was a very frail old man, and once I had gone inside, I did what had to be done.
Good morning. Hello? Who's that then? Who's there? What? Not possible! Not possible! Please! Please!
You killed a man.
Perhaps, perhaps not. I know only that I rendered him unconscious. What became of him? Even now, I do not know for certain.
I see.
It was a question of survival, Kemp. Of survival.
You robbed him, though?
Of course. A few clothes, some bandages for my face, all the money I could find, dark glasses, a soft felt hat, a small pink false nose.
That was fortunate.
Indeed, it was.
And after that?
After that, once I had obtained some fresh scientific supplies, I came to Iping and I took rooms at the Coach and Horses. There I collated my findings in cipher in those books, and I began the long and so far fruitless search for a cure. Until, that is, circumstances forced me to move on, and I thought to present myself at your door.
So why me? Why did you choose me?
Because, my dear Dr. Kemp, we are, whether you admit it or not, almost exactly the same.
There's the house, sir. All seems quiet.
Thank you, Sergeant. Miss, do you notice anything awry?
There's a lamp burning in the doctor's study. It must be in there that they're talking. I do hope he's all right.
We'll see for ourselves soon enough.
Shall I go ahead? I could discover what's happening.
No time, my dear. And I'd hate to be responsible for putting you in harm's way. No, we go in now as one. It'll be all over very soon. Sergeant?
Sir.
Prepare for attack.
I made a mistake, Kemp, a huge mistake in trying to carry this thing through alone. I've wasted strength and time and opportunities. What I want now is a goalkeeper, a helper and a hiding place, an arrangement whereby I can sleep and eat in peace unsuspected. I must have a confederate. With a confederate, with food and with rest, 1,000 things will be possible.
You seem very sure that I'll help you.
Oh, you will, Kemp, you will. For your choices are more limited than you might at present wish to believe.
Quickly, boys, quickly. Nice and quiet now. As soon as we're inside, we'll head for the study.
Yes, sir.
Miss, you've done enough. Wait here.
You won't hurt him, will you, Dr. Kemp? You'll be sure he's not caught in the crossfire?
We'll do everything we can, miss, but our priority has to be to capture the Invisible Man. And I've given them my order. Fire at will.
But Colonel, please can't you make
No
sure that...
time for that, miss. No time. Come on.
Hitherto I have gone on vague lines. We have now to consider all that invisibility means. And it will be especially useful when it comes to killing.
Killing?
I think I can walk round a man, no matter what weapon he has. I can choose my point, and I can strike as I like, dodge as I like, escape as I like. But it is assuredly killing, Kemp, that we must do now.
You can't be in earnest.
I have never been more serious. Though be clear, I do not speak of wanton killing, but rather of judicious slaying. Kemp, we must now establish a reign of terror. Through me, through the Invisible Man, we can hold this town to ransom. Kemp? Kemp, what are those noises?
I can't hear anything, other than the sound of your voice. You were saying something about a reign of terror, wasn't it?
No, those were footsteps, the heavy tread of soldiers' boots upon your stairs. Yours, Kemp. You've betrayed me.
Wait, don't rush to conclusions, and please, keep the dressing gown on. There's really no need to disrobe.
I know what you've done. And mark my words, your name will now be placed at the head of my list.
Stop, sir! Stop where you are! Raise your hands above you and surrender! I am armed and you are surrounded. Stop, sir! Stop!
Oh, but it's too late. The dressing gown is empty. He slipped past you all the moment you blundered in. Colonel Adey, the Invisible Man is on the loose again.
I'm so relieved you're safe, Doctor.
Thank you, Agatha.
As are we all, sir. But we have to get after this fellow, this Mr. Griffin. We have to trap him.
I have a few suggestions of my own on that score.
I thought you might, Kemp. Very well. Fire away.
He's quite mad, of course, completely insane. Now that makes him dangerous, but it also makes him vulnerable. And so, Colonel, you must begin at once. You must set every available man to work. You must prevent his leaving this district. set a watch on trains and roads and shipping. Day and night, the county must be astir for him. Food must be locked up and secured. Houses everywhere must be barred against him. You must keep on beating every thicket, every quiet corner, and put all weapons and all implements that might be weapons away. He can't carry such things for long. What he can snatch up and strike a man with must be hidden away. And on the roads...
The roads, sir?
Powdered glass.
Dr. Kemp, no.
It's cruel, but he has been more cruel. He thinks of nothing but his own advantage and his own safety. I have listened this day to such a story of brutal self-seeking. He's cut himself off from his own kind, and his blood is now upon his own head. For a day and a night, the colonel and his men scoured the countryside. They were rigorous. They were unstinting. They hunted without thought of mercy or remorse. Yet they had set themselves against a being unprecedented in the whole of human history. A singular creature composed in equal parts of malice and insanity. I stayed inside, away from the chaos, and slept only fitfully, dogged by dark dreams. When the following afternoon the colonel presented himself once more in my study, I knew from his haggard and careworn expression that the invisible man remained at large. What I could not have guessed, however, were the lengths to which our deranged quarry had already been driven. Colonel, you look tired. You can't have slept.
I haven't, sir, no.
I only managed a few hours myself. Please, take a seat. Tell me what's been happening.
Thank you, Doctor. And yes, I don't mind admitting I'm exhausted. I'm not what I used to be. In a place like this, there's not much call for the old exertions. I've allowed myself to get flabby.
Oh, you're being unduly pessimistic, Colonel, and too modest. Now, what news of Griffin?
We've been able to trace some of his movements, sir. Not long after he fled the scene, a small child playing near your gateway was violently caught up by some unseen force and tossed aside. The ankle of the poor little mite was broken.
Dear, dear.
After that, well, it seems your friend...
Not my friend, Colonel. Not ever that.
Well, Mr. Griffin, at any rate, it seems that he pretty much vanished from human ken. Oh, we've been busy. Don't worry about that. We've been searching. Every passenger train along a great parallelogram between Southampton, Winchester, Brighton, and Horsham. They all travelled with locked doors. And in a great circle of 20 miles round Port Burdock, men armed with guns and bludgeons and dogs have beaten the roads and fields.
Yet you've discovered nothing, I take it. Nothing at all?
I'm afraid we did find one thing, sir. It was on the edge of the gravel pit. You might know it, close to Lord Burdock's lodge gate.
Yes, I know that place.
Colonel Wadey! Colonel, over here, sir!
What is it? Oh. Good God. Do we know who this is?
I recognise him, sir. His name was Wicksteed. He was a steward to Lord Burdock. He was a kind man. Sir, he was gentle.
Looks like he was beaten to death. With an iron rod.
Why, sir? Why would he do it?
Maybe for a little money, or else just out of pure, mad, murderous rage.
You think it's him then, sir?
Well, don't you? Get the body cleared away, and keep it to yourself for now. We don't want a panic on our hands. At least we don't want things to get any worse than they already are.
I am shocked, Colonel. Even after what he told me, I had no idea that Griffin would sink so low, so quickly.
I think we've all underestimated him. Still, about your glass idea, I was unsure before, but now the roads are all covered with it. He'll cut his feet to ribbons.
Come in!
There's a letter for you, sir.
Give it here.
Sir.
Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear.
Kemp, what is it?
Have a look for yourself, and take one guess who it's from.
I see. Oh, yes, I see. Dear Dr. Kemp, you have been amazingly energetic and clever, though what you stand to gain by it I cannot imagine. You are against me. For a whole day you have chased me, you have tried to rob me of a night's rest, but I have had food in spite of you. I have slept in spite of you, and the game now is only beginning. This announces the first day of the terror. Port Burdock is no longer under the Queen, but rather under me. This is day one of year one of the new epoch. The epoch of the invisible man. And on this first day there shall be one execution for the sake of example. Dr. Kemp, my old friend, today death comes for you. Well, what do you make of it? Is it a hoax, do you think?
Well, of course it's not a hoax. I recognize his particular brand of madness bubbling in every crazed word of it.
We should get you under protection, sir. Put you under lock and key. Who's that? Who's there?
Oh, God.
It is far too late now, Dr. Kemp, for anything of that nature. Your time is up.
Come no closer, sir. I'm armed.
Are you, Colonel? Are you really?
Your gun! He has your gun!
Oh, fascinating. To see it floating there in midair, it is oddly beautiful.
Run, Dr. Kemp! Run for your life, sir!
Oh, such a brave soldier boy, so noble a sacrifice.
Colonel!
I said run, Doctor, run!
Yes, traitorous dog, run! Run all you like, but true justice shall strike you down.
And did you run then, Dr. Kemp, sir? Did you turn on your heel?
Yes, I ran. I had no other choice.
And the woman, sir? Your little Agatha?
I made an assessment, Mr. Marvel. I took a calculated risk that it was I, and I alone, for whom Griffin nursed his homicidal intent. And so, I fled from that house.
Leaving the lady behind you then, sir?
That is correct, Mr. Marvel, yes. Do you have any further remarks about my conduct?
No, sir. Of course not, sir. I wouldn't dream of it, sir.
I was most assuredly running for my life. I left the house and I sprinted down the hill in the direction of the town. Behind me, I heard the heavy footfalls of my pursuer and from time to time, a cry of vengeance or of demented hate.
I shall see you dead, Kemp. I will see you face down in the dust and I will dance upon your grave.
The road seemed to me to be indescribably vast and desolate, and the beginnings of the town far below at the foot of the hill seemed horribly remote. Still, I pressed on. I pushed myself harder and harder. I saw that in accordance with my wishes, the ground had been covered with powdered glass. Often I swerved into it, knowing that whilst my feet were comfortably shod, those of my pursuer were not. At length, I saw the town come into view, and I passed through its outlying streets. All its gaunt villas were sleeping in the afternoon sun, locked and barred. A few people were abroad, and as I passed the jolly cricketers, I called out, "The Invisible Man! The Invisible Man is behind me!" On I ran, and on past the police station where you, Mr. Marvel, no doubt slumbered in your cell, on at last into the high street where behind me now I became gradually aware that a mob was beginning to form. Make a line! All of you, make a line! We can pen him in! We can contain him! I saw many people I knew. Their faces contorted by fear and by suspicion. They did as I asked, and at last I came to rest as around Griffin and me, the net inevitably tightened.
What have you done, Kemp? What have you done? How dare you? How dare you treat me like this?
Closer and closer the townspeople came, armed with their clubs and bars and sticks and knives, anything within their reach. Griffin lashed out at me, and so I went sprawling on the ground.
Damn you! Damn you forever!
I was down in the dirt, and he kicked me once, twice, 3 times. 2 ribs cracked, and I tasted blood. Yet I saw too that he was injured. Spots of crimson were in the air, Griffin's wounds made visible. I shouted to the crowd,
He's here! He's beside me! He's here!
and then, after that, the mob moved in and fell upon him. What happened then was the most troubling thing I have ever seen. They were like a pack of dogs upon a rabbit.
No! Stand back! Have mercy! Please! Have mercy in the name of all that's holy!
I struggled to my feet.
Stop it! Stop it now! Enough! For God's sake, you're killing him!
Something in these words restored to those people a semblance of reason, and so they started to retreat. But it was too late. I could hear his ragged breathing. Painfully, I crouched down to be by his side.
Kemp! Oh, why did you let them do this to me?
Forgive me. I had no choice. They were afraid.
Afraid? Yes. I understand. I thought the process would take it from me. But, in truth, it only magnified it 1,000-fold.
As the last breath left his body, Griffin came back to humanity. Gradually, piece by piece, faint and translucent as though he were made of glass, the outline of a human being emerged. It began, that strange, burgeoning clarity, at his hands and feet, and it crept along his limbs to the vital centers of his body, like the slow spreading of a poison. Now came the white nerves, the glassy bones, and the intricate arteries, then the flesh and skin and the dead man's drawn and battered features. How pitiful he seemed, lying there, naked upon the ground. His hair and beard were white. His hands were clenched, his eyes wide open, and his expression was one of undying anger and dismay.
Dr. Kemp. Dr. Kemp, I came as soon as I could. Goodness, is that him, then? Is that the monster?
He wasn't a monster. Not a good man, exactly. But not a monster, either.
Lord. Ugly blighter, wasn't he? No wonder he wanted to walk about unseen.
Just cover his face, Sergeant.
Excuse me, sir.
Didn't you hear me? I said cover his face!
It was a decent ceremony, sir, wasn't it? Under the circumstances.
It was, yes. I thought the Padre rather understanding, given that he was once robbed by the deceased.
Well, that is the Christian thing to do.
And I suppose there's a certain poetry to his being buried back here in Iping.
I'm sure you're right, sir. By the way, the Colonel sends his regards. He's made a pretty good recovery, but he said he'd draw the line at attending the funeral of the man who shot him.
Perfectly understandable. Griffin tried to kill me too, though somehow I couldn't bring myself to stay away. I should thank you for coming with me.
I felt it to be the very least I could do. You've been, in all respects, an excellent employer. Although, sir, this will be my last service for you.
Ah. I've been expecting this. Or something of the sort. You're handing in your notice, then?
I'm afraid so, Doctor.
And are we to lose you to the delights of matrimony?
However did you guess that?
Well, you've seen a good deal, as I understand it, of the Colonel since his injury. I simply assumed that there had grown up between you certain natural intimacy.
The Colonel is a decent man, Dr. Kemp, and a widower, but no, he's not for me. He does, however, have a son.
Ah.
And, well, he is something rather special. I do hope you'll approve.
Of course I do. And the young Master Adi is surely the most fortunate of men. Come along, I'll buy you a drink to celebrate your engagement and to mourn your departure. I'll brook no refusal in the matter.
Very well, sir. Although this is a small country place, I shall have to drink outside.
Oh, I don't know about that. I think an exception might be made in your case. Actually, there's a rather good inn in these parts. Maybe you know it. The Coach and Horses.
Well then, sir. I think that concludes our business, doesn't it? That's the full story told.
Not quite, I think.
Is that right?
You've been fortunate, haven't you, Mr. Marvel? From a gentleman of the road to a publican of some renown.
No, I've been lucky, sir, yes. Well, a certain governmental organisation have been most generous. They've set me up here in this little place. They've invested.
In exchange for your silence? About anything you might know about the late Mr. Griffin?
You're very astute, sir. Very wise. But I made an exception in your case. I didn't turn you away like I have all the others. Because like me, you were there, sir. You were there. And you knew him. And you heard his voice in your ear, and you know what it is to live in terror of your life.
Then I'm grateful, Thomas, for your having indulged me.
Hasn't been any indulgence, sir. In point of fact, I've rather enjoyed our conversation. One veteran talking to another.
As have I. But there's still one last question I have to put to you.
What's that then?
Where are the books?
What books would those be, sir?
The 3 red books to which Griffin committed the full details of the process of invisibility.
Oh, them books, sir. Them books.
You were the last to have them. Where are they now?
Oh, I've no idea about that. No idea at all.
I do believe you're lying to me.
Of course I'm not, sir.
And so, I'm going to ask you again.
Sir? No, there's no need for guns, sir. There's no need for violence.
Where are those books, Mr. Marvel? Where are they?
Oh! Please, please, Dr. Kemp, stop it now!
When I fire again, it will not be into the air, so I'll ask you one more time. Where are those books?
Fine, I'll get them for you, but I warn you. I'll tell you now, those books are cursed, sir. Whatever's in them don't bring no happiness, no glory to no one.
Thank you. But I do believe I'll be the judge of that.
Why do you want them anyway?
Why do you think? Griffin was a vainglorious fool. He acquired the power of a god, and he threw it away on trivialities. But what might a wilier man do with such knowledge? How high might he rise? How much power might he obtain? Limitless, Mr. Marvel. He'd be limitless.
No, sir. Please. You can't be in earnest.
Oh, but I am. Thomas Marvel, you will long remember this day. It will go down in history as the day upon which you met the world's second, its most distinguished, and by far the greatest, invisible man.
Professor? Fascinating. What on earth was that?
Do you know,
I've not the faintest notion.
Coming soon from Big Finish Productions, The First Men in the Moon.
Edward! My boy! Did you see it?
See it, Professor? The sky is black with it. Your house is gone.
Welcome, Professor. Welcome to my realm. We are the first of our kind to slip the bonds of our planet and soar into the infinite.
The one who rules over us all, the Grand Luna.
And I am very much afraid that it is preparing, even as I speak, to exact the most merciless judgment upon us all.
And so we do what Englishmen always do and have always done. We stand up for our beliefs and we fight for our survival.
Prepare our Council of Extraordinary Measures for a meeting most urgent and rare.
You think too much about the future. For now, enjoy the present. Relish the moment. And hold on!
Big Finish.